A soldier and his loyal German shepherd were driving through the snowy streets of Denver when they saw her. A 3-year-old girl sitting alone beneath a flickering neon sign, her tiny hands trembling in the cold. She lifted her face, and in that instant he froze. The child was his own daughter. The truth behind why she was left there would break his heart and pull him into a dangerous journey of betrayal, redemption, and an unexpected miracle. What happened after will restore your faith in family, love, and the quiet ways God still works in our lives. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. And if you believe no child should ever be left alone in the cold, hit that subscribe button, because what you are about to hear might just change the way you see the world. The snow had been falling over Denver since early evening, layering every rooftop, streetlight, and parked car in a quiet, white stillness. The city, though large, had a peculiar hush in the middle of winter storms, as if the wind itself swallowed sound. The neon signs of convenience stores and diners were the only things that broke through the darkness, their red and green colors glowing strangely against the snowflakes drifting down like shattered glass. It was into this scene that David Miller pulled his patrol-issued pickup truck, the tires crunching over ice as he steered toward a 24-hour convenience store on the corner of Colfax Avenue. David was 34 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with a square jaw partly hidden under stubble that had grown during his long shifts. His hair was dark brown, cut short for duty, though flecked with gray at the temples, a trace of years spent under stress more than age itself. His hazel eyes had a tired steadiness about them, the look of a man who had spent many nights watching others' chaos and carrying his own silently. David had served as a police officer in Denver before being sent to Washington for a 6-month training program. That absence had carved a distance between him and his personal life, and he had returned to find threads of family unraveling. His ex-wife, Rachel, had been struggling financially and emotionally, and though he called, she kept her distance. Tonight, all he wanted was to stop by the store, pick up some supplies, and return to the empty house on Willow Street that had once held laughter and photographs on the walls. Beside him sat Max, his German shepherd, who at 6 years old carried the weight and poise of a seasoned guardian. Max had once trained as a K9 unit dog, his coat a striking mix of black and tan, his amber eyes keen and intelligent. His body was muscular, each movement efficient, ears always upright, listening. Though retired from active police work after an injury that had healed imperfectly in one hind leg, Max had been adopted by David, and together they had built an unspoken bond. Max was loyal in the way only a dog could be, protective, alert, and strangely perceptive to David's moods. Tonight, Max rested with his head on his paws, occasionally lifting his gaze to the swirling snow outside, his breath fogging up the window. As David parked the truck and turned off the engine, he adjusted his heavy winter coat, pulling the collar higher against the cold he knew awaited him. He stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the wet snow, the air sharp with the mix of gasoline fumes from the nearby pump and the crisp, metallic scent of winter. The red neon sign of the store buzzed faintly overhead, reflecting across the icy puddles like streaks of fire. David reached for the duffel bag in the passenger seat, an old army green canvas sack he still carried from his training days, and slung it over his shoulder. He planned only to grab a few snacks, maybe a small toy or a stuffed animal he thought Emily might someday like if he ever got the chance to be close to her again. That thought made his chest tighten. Contact with his daughter had always been complicated since the separation, and the memory of Rachel refusing visits echoed in the back of his mind. Just as he locked the truck door and turned toward the entrance, a low growl from Max made him pause. The dog had stood up in the passenger seat, ears pointed, nose pressed against the glass. David frowned and listened. Through the quiet hiss of falling snow, he caught the faintest sound, like a sob, thin and broken, carrying from somewhere at the far end of the lot. His pulse quickened. He scanned the area. Rows of snow-dusted cars, a silver sedan with streaks of slush down its side, a trash bin half buried under snow, the faint glow of the store's security camera perched above. Nothing moved except the lazy drift of flakes. But the sound came again, fragile, as if breaking. Without hesitation, David moved around the front of his truck, boots crunching against the icy asphalt. His breath fogged as he stepped closer to the row of cars. There, huddled against the bumper of the silver sedan, was a small figure. A child sat curled into herself, arms wrapped around her stomach, shoulders shaking. Her thin sweater was soaked through, clinging to her tiny frame, and her jeans were dark with melted snow. Her shoes, canvas sneakers not meant for this weather, sagged with water. Strands of light brown hair stuck to her temple, her lips pale, and when she looked up, her eyes were rimmed red from crying. David froze where he stood, his heart clenched with an unfamiliar dread. He dropped to one knee, the cold seeping through his pants instantly, but he didn't care. He reached a hand forward, stopping halfway so as not to startle her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, voice steady despite the rush in his chest. "Are you okay?" The girl's chin trembled. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. A few raindrops clung stubbornly to her eyelashes despite the falling snow. She opened her mouth, but no words came, just a shaky breath that cut David deeper than anything else. He saw her face more clearly, then delicate cheekbones, wide, frightened eyes, a small nose, lips pressed together in determination, though she was only 3 years old. For a split second, a vision tore through him, himself at 7 years old, crouched under the tin awning of a trailer home in Tulsa, rain dripping, waiting for a father who never came. That memory, buried for decades, collided with the present and left a weight pressing hard against his throat. And then he knew. This wasn't just any child. This was Emily, his Emily, the daughter whose pictures he had only seen in brief glimpses, grainy images sent by Rachel months ago with quick captions. "She's asleep, honey," or "too tired to talk tonight." Now the real child, fragile and shaking, was right in front of him in the snow. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He glanced around quickly, the ATM nearby, the glowing open sign of the store, the distant headlights of an SUV passing on the street, but there was no sign of Rachel. No one else lingered in the lot, only silence, only the child, and the terrible realization that she had been left alone. Max barked once from the truck, sharp and urgent, as if echoing the thought. Danger, abandonment, a wrongness that couldn't be ignored. David turned back, his hazel eyes locking on Emily again. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Why, Rachel? Why did you leave our child here?" The words dissolved into the night, carried away by the snow, unanswered. Emily shivered violently under her thin sweater. David pulled off his coat, draping it gently over her shoulders, covering her small head with the fold to shield her from the snow. The fabric rustled softly, scraping against her soaked clothes as he lifted her carefully to her feet. She leaned against him, light as a whisper, her legs trembling but not resisting. He bent low, murmuring, "We should get out of this cold, okay? Let's get you warm." She didn't speak, only nodded faintly, her lips forming a shape that looked like relief. David led her toward the truck. Max wagged his tail inside, whining with a mix of worry and eagerness as David opened the passenger door. He eased Emily onto the seat, her small frame sinking into the leather, and pulled the seatbelt across, cocooning her further with his coat. Max sniffed her gently, then settled protectively at her side, his warm body pressing against her as if to share heat. Emily looked at the dog, blinking slowly, and for the first time since David had seen her, her breathing steadied just a little. David closed the door softly, stood in the snow for a moment, and turned his eyes back across the lot one last time. The neon buzzed faintly, casting red reflections across the white expanse, but no trace of Rachel, no note left behind, no shadow at all. Only the snow-covered silence and the unbearable question that echoed inside his mind. He clenched his jaw, then climbed behind the wheel. When he looked into the rearview mirror, Emily's wide eyes met his, glowing faintly in the neon's reflection. She finally whispered, her voice small but steady enough to cut through the cold. "Please, Daddy. I just want to go home." David's heart ached. He reached forward, turning the heater switch toward her seat, his voice low and calm as he answered, "You will, sweetheart. I'll take you somewhere safe." And as the snow kept falling over Denver, blanketing every secret in its quiet shroud, David knew nothing about his life would ever be the same again. The drive from the neon-lit convenience store to Willow Street was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the rhythmic sweep of the wipers pushing away the wet snow. David kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Emily, still wrapped in his coat, her eyelids heavy but her small hands clutching the fabric as if letting go would mean being left behind again. Beside her in the seat, Max sat upright, his head close to her shoulder, ears twitching at every passing sound outside, protective and unyielding. Denver in winter had a way of turning familiar neighborhoods into ghost towns. Porches were blanketed with snow, driveways empty, and street lamps cast pale halos onto drifting flurries. By the time he turned onto Willow Street, David's chest had tightened with a strange mix of dread and responsibility. This street had once held fragments of a life he had believed in. Rachel waiting on the porch with a tired smile, Emily's toys scattered on the living room carpet. Now the house loomed in darkness, its siding dull gray under layers of ice, the porch light off, the steps covered in frost. The front door stood slightly ajar, the wind pushing against it to let snowflakes tumble inside. David parked at the curb, turned off the engine, and breathed in the stillness before stepping out. His boots crunched through the fresh snow as he opened the back door of the truck. He lifted Emily carefully, feeling how light she was, as though the winter air had hollowed her out. She stirred faintly, head resting against his shoulder, while Max leapt down beside them, nose to the ground, tail stiff as he sniffed along the path leading to the porch. Inside, the house was colder than the street. The musty smell of stale air hit him immediately, mixed with the metallic tang of frozen pipes. David reached for the light switch. The bulb flickered reluctantly before casting a dim glow over the barren living room. The carpet bore streaks of dried mud. Cardboard boxes lined the walls as if someone had started packing but never finished. A single picture frame hung crookedly, a faded photograph of last Christmas, Rachel holding Emily against the backdrop of a plastic tree. David's jaw tightened, his mind flicking back to the countless video calls from training. Rachel insisting everything was fine, her smile brittle under fluorescent kitchen light. Now the truth pressed in with the silence. He laid Emily gently on the sofa, tucking the coat tighter around her. Max padded to the doorway of the kitchen, ears perked, letting out a low growl. David followed, stepping into a room littered with unopened mail, empty beer cans, and bills spread across the counter. The refrigerator hummed weakly, its bulb illuminating only an expired carton of milk and a half-empty mustard jar. On the table lay a red stamped notice from the power company, another from the water utility, and one envelope from the bank marked "Final Notice." David exhaled slowly, pushing a hand across his face. He had suspected Rachel was struggling, but this level of neglect was something else entirely. From the hall came the creak of floorboards. David spun around, hand instinctively brushing his holster, but Max had already bounded ahead, nose pressed against the doorframe of the bedroom. David opened it to find only a half-made bed, the blanket thrown aside, dresser drawers half open, clothes missing. No sign of Rachel, no warmth left in the sheets. He checked the bathroom cold tiles, streaks on the mirror, an abandoned hairbrush on the sink. The air was heavy with absence. Returning to the living room, he crouched beside Emily again. She stirred, her lips moving faintly in the half-sleep of exhaustion. "Mommy drove away," she whispered, eyes fluttering shut again. The words sliced through him more sharply than any winter wind. A knock on the door startled him. Max barked once, deep and resonant. David moved cautiously to the porch. Standing there was Mrs. Linda Parker, the neighbor from 2 houses down. She was in her late 60s, short and slightly stooped from years of working as a nurse, her silver hair tied back under a knitted hat, a heavy woolen coat buttoned to her neck. Her eyes, pale blue, were sharp even in the dim light. "David?" she said, voice carrying both surprise and concern. "I didn't know you were back." David nodded, lowering his guard but not his exhaustion. "Just tonight. Have you seen Rachel?" Mrs. Parker pressed her lips, hesitation flickering across her lined face. "She hasn't been herself." Men coming around, tall fellow, close-cropped hair, always smoking on the porch. They argued about money, loud enough I could hear through the walls. 2 nights ago, I heard a door slam. Next morning, her car was gone. I worried about the little one. Her eyes shifted past David, catching sight of the small figure on the sofa. Relief softened her expression. "I'm glad Emily's safe with you." David thanked her, voice low, and she touched his arm briefly, a nurse's instinctive gesture of reassurance. "If you need anything, food, blankets, you come by. Don't let pride freeze you out," she said before retreating into the snow, her boots leaving neat patterns on the path. Back inside, David closed the door tight, turning the deadbolt. He sat on the edge of the sofa, running a hand through his hair. Emily's breathing steadied as she clutched an old teddy bear he had found on a shelf, its ear sun-faded but still soft. Max curled at her feet, eyes half closed but alert, chest rising and falling in sync with the child's. The warmth of the small moment, the girl, the dog, the fragile piece contrasted bitterly with the icy emptiness of the house. David picked up the pile of unopened mail, flipping through until he found one envelope with a motel logo on the corner. Colfax Inn. A receipt tucked inside showed payment for room 214, cash, only 2 nights prior. His pulse quickened. Sitting back, David thought of Rachel. Her struggles had always been wrapped in pride, never asking for help, never admitting the depth of her trouble. Perhaps it came from her childhood. He remembered her stories of growing up in a household where admitting weakness was met with scorn, where her father's temper had trained her to hide rather than speak. That stubbornness had once seemed like strength to him. Now it looked like a trap she had built around herself and Emily. Emily stirred again, her eyes opening briefly. She looked at David with a fragile recognition, as though part of her understood who he was. "Daddy," she whispered, uncertain. David's throat tightened. He smoothed her hair gently and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes again, trusting enough to drift back into sleep. Max nudged David's leg with his nose, a silent reminder of the responsibility now resting fully on his shoulders. The snow pressed harder against the windows, rattling the panes, and the house creaked as though bearing the weight of its secrets. David stayed awake long after midnight, watching Emily sleep. The bills spread across the table, the receipt from Colfax Inn burning in his mind. Somewhere out there, Rachel was entangled in something dangerous, and she had left Emily vulnerable in the cold. But tonight, in this frozen house, the child was safe. Max shifted at the foot of the sofa, ears twitching at the sound of wind, his eyes glimmering with an unspoken promise. Nothing would harm this family as long as he stood guard. The snowstorm had eased by morning, but the streets of Denver still lay buried in white silence. Plows carved slow paths along Colfax Avenue, their flashing amber lights bouncing against walls of piled snow. David hadn't slept much in the frozen house. He had dozed briefly in the armchair, Max sprawled at his feet, while Emily remained curled on the sofa under layers of blankets. Every sound of the wind against the window had kept him half alert, his mind circling the receipt from Colfax Inn, the memory of Rachel's absence, and the faint whisper of Emily saying her mother drove away. By mid-morning, David bundled Emily in his own coat again, placed her gently in the truck, and let Max leap into the back. They drove slowly down the snow-packed streets, passing neighbors digging out cars, steam rising from chimneys. David's destination was the convenience store from the night before, the one whose red neon had lit the moment that changed everything. He needed proof of what he had already feared. The store stood squat and ordinary, its sign buzzing faintly even under daylight. Inside, the air smelled of coffee grounds and disinfectant, the floor marked with wet footprints from customers shaking off snow. Behind the counter stood Rachel Scott, not his Rachel, but a woman with the same name, younger by perhaps 10 years. Rachel Scott was in her early 30s, medium height, with auburn hair pulled back into a ponytail, strands escaping to frame a round face. Her eyes were hazel, but sharper than her appearance suggested, a product of working long graveyard shifts in a city that never quite slept. She wore a navy blue fleece jacket with the store's logo stitched near the collar and a silver sports watch on her wrist. Years earlier, she had once been a university student hoping to become a teacher, but financial hardship had rerouted her life. She worked double shifts here to keep her younger brother in school. That struggle had left her practical, wary of strangers, yet also stubbornly fair. When David entered carrying Emily, Rachel Scott glanced up, her eyes narrowing with instinctive caution. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked, recognizing his bearing even though he wore no uniform. David placed Emily gently on a chair near the counter, Max sitting close like a shadow. "I need to see your exterior cameras from last night, around 7:30. A child was left in your lot. This is her." He angled Emily so the woman could see her pale face, still weary but calmer now. Rachel Scott pressed her lips. "Store policy is police access only. Unless there's an incident report filed, I can't." She broke off when David quietly slid his wallet onto the counter, open to his police ID. His hazel eyes met hers, steady, heavy with urgency, but not force. "I'm not here to bend rules for myself," he said quietly. "I'm here because my daughter was abandoned in that snow, and I need to know by whom." The words, low and raw, cut through the practiced defenses of a woman used to denying requests. Rachel Scott exhaled, studied him for a long second, then nodded. "Back room. 5 minutes. No copies." She led him behind the counter into a cramped office lined with shelves of paper goods and stacked boxes of syrup. A monitor glowed faintly on the desk, divided into 4 grainy black and white feeds. Rachel sat, her fingers quick as she scrolled back through the timeline, the screen sliding in reverse through images of swirling snow and cars pulling in and out. "There," David said sharply when a silver sedan crept into frame. The timestamp read 7:43 p.m. The vehicle rolled slowly across the lot, its taillights reflecting on the icy puddles. The driver's door opened, and Rachel Miller, his Rachel, stepped out. She wore a knit cap pulled low, her shoulders hunched against the snow. With her free hand she held little Emily, guiding her toward the white-painted line near the sedan. David's breath stopped in his throat. His knuckles whitened against the desk as he leaned closer. He saw Rachel bend down, say something inaudible to the child, then release her hand. Emily stood alone, shoulders hunched, as Rachel climbed back into the driver's seat. The sedan shifted into reverse, paused for a glance around, then pulled out of the lot and disappeared. The camera froze Emily's tiny figure against the bumper, the neon light stretching her shadow like a scar across the snow. Behind David, Max whined low, tail stiff, sensing the storm inside his master. David swallowed hard, heat rising behind his eyes. His voice was hoarse when he whispered, "Rachel, what have you done?" Rachel Scott, the store manager, studied him carefully, her sympathy cautious but real. "That woman? Your wife?" David nodded, unable to unclench his jaw. "You want me to call this in officially?" she asked, voice low, steady, not pressing but offering. "Not yet," David answered, shaking his head. "I need to understand before it all gets swallowed by paperwork." He forced himself to memorize the blurred plate as Rachel Scott zoomed in. Only the first 3 letters were clear, but they burned into his mind. As he turned to leave, Rachel Scott caught his arm lightly. "For what it's worth," she said, "sometimes people don't abandon out of malice. Sometimes it's fear, but fear doesn't excuse it." David gave a tight nod, appreciating the honesty though it burned. He gathered Emily back into his arms, Max padding beside him, and stepped out into the snow-bright daylight. Later that afternoon, he drove across town to see Tom O'Connor, an old friend from his academy days who now ran a small auto garage on Peoria Street. Tom was in his late 30s, taller than David but thinner, his frame wiry from years of working under hoods and lifting tires. His face bore grease stains like permanent tattoos, but his blue eyes had an easy openness that made people trust him quickly. He had a crooked grin that spoke of resilience. He had once broken his jaw in a bar fight years back, leaving him with a smile forever slightly tilted. Despite the roughness, Tom was loyal to a fault, the kind of friend who'd show up in a snowstorm with jumper cables and black coffee without asking questions. When David arrived, Tom was wiping his hands on a rag, steam rising from a car radiator behind him. "Miller," he barked with the warmth of surprise. "Heard you were back." "Who's this little one?" He nodded toward Emily, who clung shyly to David's leg. David hesitated, then said, "My daughter." "Emily." The words felt both foreign and right on his tongue. Tom's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't pry. "What brings you here?" David handed him a scrap of paper with the blurred plate letters. "Silver sedan. You ever seen one with these characters come through?" Tom frowned, scratching his jaw. "Plenty of sedans, but—" He trailed off, then rummaged through a drawer of old records. Within minutes, he pulled out a faded receipt. "Yeah, guy came in a few months back. Jason Young, tall, buzz cut, late 20s, paid late, always looked like he had trouble following him. Smelled of smoke, kept checking the lot while we worked on his car, drove a silver sedan, same partial plate." David's stomach tightened. The pieces were aligning too fast. He crouched briefly to check on Emily, who was sitting near Max with a box of toy wrenches Tom had set down. Her small hands twisted the plastic, her lips pressed tight in concentration. For a moment she looked like any other child, but the shadows in her eyes lingered. David stood, clasped Tom's shoulder. "Thanks. Keep this between us for now." Tom nodded firmly. "You got it. Just be careful, Dave." Snow hides tracks. but not forever. As night fell again over Denver, David drove back through streets muffled in white silence, Emily asleep against Max's side in the back seat. He gripped the wheel, mind turning with the certainty of what he had seen, Rachel leaving their daughter, Jason Young in the picture, debts and danger circling. The snow fell harder again, coating every street lamp in silver halos. Inside the truck, the warmth of the heater mixed with the steady breath of his child and the watchful eyes of Max. The storm outside was only beginning. The Colfax Inn did not look like a place anyone chose willingly. It crouched on the edge of Denver's east side, a squat two-story building with faded brown drapes pulled tight over its windows, its neon sign sputtering in and out under the weight of clinging snow. The gravel lot was wet with slush, every tire rut filled with icy water that reflected the dim yellow glow of the overhead lamps. A cold wind swept across the parking spaces, carrying the smell of diesel from the nearby road and the faint metallic tang of salt scattered to keep cars from skidding. David's pickup sat in the shadows at the far end, engine low, heater humming to keep Emily asleep in the back. She was wrapped snugly in blankets with Max curled beside her, the dog's steady warmth pressing against her side. Max had not stopped watching since they'd arrived. Every sound from the lot made his ears flick. Every shadow drew his amber eyes. His body was tense, though silent, as if he knew instinctively the weight of what they were about to face. David stood outside the truck, snow crunching under his boots, his breath clouding the air as he scanned the building. Room 214, he knew from the motel receipt, was on the second floor. A curtain rippled faintly as if someone inside had just looked out. His gut tightened. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket and dialed a number he had saved for emergencies. It rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. "Officer Dana Morales," the voice said. "Dana, it's David Miller. I've found Rachel. Colfax Inn, room 214. She's with Jason Young." There was no hesitation. "Stay put. I'll be there." Dana Morales was a woman in her late 30s, tall and lean with long legs that gave her a commanding stride. She had olive skin, black hair pulled into a neat braid beneath her heavy winter coat, and sharp, dark eyes that missed little. Years on the force had carved discipline into her posture, but her tone remained calm and steady, the kind that reassured even in chaos. She had once worked undercover in narcotics, an experience that left scars no one could see. Nights spent isolated, trust constantly tested, the betrayal of partners who folded under pressure. Those years hardened her resolve, but also gave her empathy for victims, especially children, who became collateral in adult mistakes. When her patrol SUV pulled into the lot 10 minutes later, she stepped out, her boots crunching decisively, radio clipped to her shoulder. She gave David a quick nod, no wasted words. "Backup is on the way. Don't move until we coordinate." David explained what he knew: Rachel's debt, Jason's presence, the loan sharks rumored by Tom O'Connor, and the danger circling closer. Dana listened without interruption, her eyes scanning the second-floor walkway, the silver sedan parked tight against the wall, the flicker of movement behind a curtain. Finally she said, "You've done the right thing calling me. But you don't go in there. Understood? You're a father tonight, not a cop." He wanted to argue, but saw the logic in her eyes. He nodded reluctantly. Inside room 214, Rachel sat with her arms folded, her face pale under the glow of a dim lamp. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes rimmed with sleepless red. Jason Young paced near the table, a tall man in his late 20s with close-cropped blonde hair and a lean build that hinted at strength honed more by street fights than gyms. His jacket was worn leather, his boots muddy, his face sharp with nerves. Jason was the kind of man who thrived on hustles that never lasted, each scheme dragging in debts bigger than the last. He had once been a mechanic's apprentice, but a gambling problem and quick temper ruined his chances at steady work. Now he lived by half-truths and borrowed time. Jason shoved a stack of papers across the table. "Sign these, Rachel. Transfer rights now. By morning, we're gone." The cleaner it looks, the safer Rachel's fingers trembled over the pen. She was in her early 30s, petite with long brown hair that had once been neatly styled, but now fell limp over her shoulders. She wore a faded sweater too thin for winter, her face lined with exhaustion. She had once been lively, laughing easily in the early days with David, but years of money worries had stripped the light from her eyes. Fear had etched deeper lines, and now guilt clung to her voice when she whispered, "What about Emily?" "I left her." Jason cut her off sharply. Leaving her was the only safe move. If they track you with the kid, we're done. You saw those men 2 nights ago. They don't care who's holding your hand. Her eyes filled, but she swallowed the sob, gripping the pen tighter. Down in the lot, Dana directed her team with precise hand signals. 2 officers moved to cover the rear exit, another positioned near David's truck to keep watch over Emily. David paced like a caged animal, glancing constantly at the second-floor walkway. Max pressed his nose against the glass of the truck window, fogging it with warm breath, his body vibrating with anticipation as if he sensed Rachel's presence close by. Snow swirled heavier, coating the sedan, dimming the motel's neon into a dull blur. Then headlights swept across the lot as another vehicle arrived. 3 men stepped out, collars high, their coats bulging with what was hidden beneath. Loan sharks, David had no doubt. Their footsteps were steady, their eyes scanning the shadows as they climbed the stairs. Dana raised her radio, murmured into it, her expression calm but sharp. Inside, the knock came. 3 raps, firm, not polite. Jason stiffened. "Stay quiet," he hissed to Rachel, moving toward the door. He cracked it an inch, chain still fastened. A deep voice outside said flatly, "Open up." 2 minutes. Jason's glance darted to the papers, then to the window. Calculation flickered across his eyes. He slid the chain free. The door pushed wider than he intended. One of the men stepped into the threshold, the smell of tobacco and snow following him in. Rachel instinctively stepped back, spine against the table. Her breath came quick, fear flaring in her eyes. From 2 doors down the hall, David's chest clenched. He could see the strip of light widening, Rachel's silhouette backing away. Dana's hand touched his arm lightly, commanding without words. "Wait for my signal," she whispered. David's jaw was tight, but he forced himself to nod. His heart pounded with each muffled sound from inside the room, each shuffle of feet on the hallway carpet. He wanted to break the door down himself, but Max's steady, amber gaze from the truck reminded him of what Dana had said. Tonight, he was a father first. Dana lifted her hand. Officers in position. The snow fell harder outside, blanketing the lot, muffling the world. Time seemed to hold its breath. The hallway of the Colfax Inn was narrow and smelled of damp carpet and stale cigarette smoke. Yellow bulbs flickered overhead, casting a jaundiced glow across peeling wallpaper patterned with faded stripes. Snow rattled against the thin windows, muffling the roar of the highway beyond. At the far end, room 214's door hung slightly ajar, its chain lock now undone, the murmur of voices and the scrape of a chair carrying faintly into the hall. David stood with his back pressed against the wall 2 doors down, his heart pounding hard enough to echo in his ears. Officer Dana Morales crouched near the stairwell, her calm expression unshaken by the mounting tension. She spoke into her radio in clipped tones, her voice low but commanding, coordinating the officers posted at the rear and in the lot below. Her presence radiated steadiness. She had seen worse and knew fear was useless currency in moments like this. Inside the room, Rachel Miller clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The papers Jason had shoved in front of her lay scattered now, the pen rolling across the floor. Jason Young shifted uneasily, his lean frame taut with nervous energy. His pale hair clung damp to his forehead from melted snow, his jaw tight. The men who had arrived from the stairwell moments earlier now loomed near the door. 3 of them in heavy coats that strained at the seams, eyes scanning the room like predators marking territory. One spoke flatly, his voice like gravel. "Time's up, Young." "Where's our money?" Jason forced a thin smile, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "It's coming. You'll have it transferred any minute. Papers are ready, just a matter of formality." His words tripped over themselves. The tallest of the loan sharks, a man in his 40s with broad shoulders and a crooked nose that looked like it had been broken more than once, sneered. His dark hair was slicked back, his eyes cold and small. His name was Victor, and though David had never met him, the reputation preceded him, a man who collected debts not with bills but with bruises. Victor stepped closer, knocking over the empty cup on the table, making Rachel flinch. "Civil," Victor repeated mockingly. "Civil would have been paying on time." Rachel's breath came faster. She wasn't built for confrontation. Her petite frame and soft features only highlighted how out of place she was among these hardened men. Yet she found a sliver of strength, whispering, "Please, my daughter." Jason shot her a sharp glare, cutting her off. His hands twitched near the table as if considering grabbing the papers as a shield. In the hall, Dana gave the signal. Her hand rose once, then dropped sharply. David's throat constricted, but he remembered her words. He was the distraction, nothing more. He stepped forward, his boots heavy against the carpet, and knocked twice on the wrong door deliberately, just beside 214. "Sorry," he called, slurring his voice to sound casual, almost drunken. "Got the wrong room? Anybody order food?" Inside, chairs scraped as heads turned. Jason cursed under his breath and cracked the door open. "No one called," he snapped. That was the moment. From both ends of the corridor, officers surged forward, their steps swift but controlled. Commands rang out. Hands where we can see them. Sharp, clipped, rehearsed. Weapons glinted under the dim lights, aimed not to threaten, but to control. Chaos burst in an instant. The loan sharks froze, then raised their hands slowly as officers poured into the room. Metal objects clattered onto the carpet as they were disarmed. Knives, a revolver, a steel baton. Jason panicked. He darted toward the window, but Dana was faster. She shoved the curtain aside, weapon raised, her voice iron. "Stop! Police!" Jason faltered, eyes wide, then backed against the wall, his breath ragged. Rachel collapsed to her knees, her arms wrapping around herself, tears spilling freely now. The sight of uniforms breaking into the room shattered whatever brittle composure she had left. She sobbed, voice broken. "My daughter, please, tell me where she is." From the doorway, David spoke, his tone quiet but steady. "She's safe. She's with me." Rachel's head jerked up, her eyes locking on his. In them was a storm of guilt, relief, and recognition. She nodded again and again, whispering, "Thank you, thank you," until her voice failed. Victor and his men were pulled back, hands cuffed, their protests ignored. Jason was dragged toward the door as well, his sharp features twisted with resentment. He tried to jerk free, his voice rising. "You don't understand. I was protecting her." But no one listened. The hallway filled with the sound of radios, the shuffle of boots, the cold clang of handcuffs. David remained in place, gripping the railing to keep from stepping closer. Every instinct screamed to comfort Rachel, to shout at her, to demand why, but Dana's glance steadied him. This wasn't the moment for anger, it was the moment for control. Down below in the lot, patrol cars slid in silently, lights off, until the last order crackled through the radio. "Scene secure." The red and blue strobe switched on suddenly, washing the snow in flashing color, reflecting against the motel's windows like fractured glass. The air seemed to breathe again, tension leaking away. Rachel was escorted gently out of the room by a female officer, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Please," she gasped again, clinging to the officer's sleeve. "Take me to her." David answered softly from behind, not past her shoulder, but only for her to hear. "She's asleep." "She's safe." Rachel broke down completely then, nodding, tears streaming, her body collapsing into the officer's steady grip. David let go of the railing finally, exhaling long and hard. His chest ached with the release of tension he hadn't realized he'd been holding since the night before. He thought of Emily in the truck below, Max's amber eyes watching over her, the steady rhythm of her breath. For the first time in what felt like years, he allowed himself to believe that she was truly safe. In the end, this story is not only about finding a lost child or exposing a dangerous scheme, it is a reminder that even in the middle of storms, mistakes, and fear, a father's love, the compassion of a community, and the courage of those who defend justice can open the way to hope. Sometimes we cannot see miracles right away, but through perseverance, helping hands at the right moment, and the guidance of God, the darkest night can still turn into light. In our daily lives, we too can become part of such miracles. When we listen to someone who feels hopeless, when we offer support to a child in need, or when we choose forgiveness instead of anger. Small acts, repeated every day, are how God continues to write His miracles through us. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you can follow more inspiring journeys. Let us also pray that God blesses us all, that fathers, mothers, and children everywhere may always be safe, loved, and guided in His light. And if you believe that God's miracles are still present in our busy world today, write your prayer in the comments and join us by saying amen.